During my entire career of PC building, there has always been an absolute meta GPU for the different price ranges. In terms of FPS per dollar and bang for your buck value, there will always be at least one card that shines above the rest. Over the past few years, we've seen the RX 5700 XT, RX 6700 XT, and even the RX 580 fulfill these roles at their given price ranges. But today, the meta shifts. This here is the new best $150 graphics card that is completely brand new. So today we're getting the microscope out and taking a closer look, after a quick word from today's sponsor, that is.
Today's video is sponsored by GVG Mall, and you probably already know that I've been using them for so long to activate Windows on a ton of my own builds. They're actually running a huge sale right now, which boosts my normal 18% discount up to 25% off if you use code ZTT18, and I'll have that linked at the top of the description. They not only have Windows keys, but also a ton of other stuff such as Office, and even game keys for platforms like Steam, Origin, and Uplay, and they even have console stuff too, like PSN and Xbox prepaid cards as well. Activating Windows is super simple and only takes like 3 minutes total, so activate Windows today and remove that nasty watermark, and don't forget to use ZTT18 for 25% off.
Alright, so I'll admit, I did something a little shady in last week's video that I need to come clean about. We did a full review video about the new RTX 3050 6GB card, and we benchmarked it against a ton of other $100 to $200 graphics cards. For the first time ever, I even gave you my entire Notion database so you could screenshot that and just look at the data yourself. What I didn't tell you was that there was an extra hidden column on that testing chart for a different GPU that I think is better than them all. We kept that hidden so we can make today's video. This here, ladies and gentlemen, is the RX 6600M, and before you click off this video because it's not a standard model name that you've never heard of before, let me explain how awesome this graphics card really is. For starters, like the name suggests, the actual chip on here is the mobile version of the RX 6600, which by the way is already an extremely valuable card, but that doesn't mean it's worse.
Judge me by my size, do you?
TechYes City actually covered these 6600Ms last year, and with a little bit of undervolting, he actually got his 6600M to perform better than a full desktop 6600. He also took the entire thing apart and came to the conclusion that these are indeed brand new chips. It's not a typical AliExpress knockoff with a brand new PCB and fan shroud, but then a used GPU die. It makes sense because people weren't mining on RX 6600Ms during the crypto booms, so there's no motivation to use anything other than a brand new chip in here. I'm sure there's some supplier over in China that can source these 6600Ms that were supposed to go to laptops or mini PCs for super cheap, so then they just turn them into desktop grade graphics cards and make a profit. And let me tell you, unless if there's something unethical going on behind the scenes that I don't know about, I will happily give them my money. We didn't undervolt like TechYes City did, and I'll take his word that this was a new chip, but what we did do was benchmark our card against a real 6600 and some other cards, and the results were honestly shocking. Before we get to that though, let's back up a little bit and talk about pricing, because that's where the real discussion of which card is the most meta begins. The exact model I have here is from Milsea, which by the way came in a typical shady box that looked like it was designed for a knockoff NVIDIA card, but that doesn't really matter. At the time of producing this video, I don't think this model is in stock anymore, but if you search for RX 6600Ms on AliExpress, I do see a few models available for $150 to $170. As a spoiler alert, at $150, I honestly wouldn't recommend any other GPU compared to this one, well, maybe one other one, provided you're willing to shop on AliExpress. Now, just for the record, shopping on AliExpress isn't what a lot of people on the internet make it out to be. AliExpress is just a marketplace just like Amazon, but it's in China. There are a lot of companies that simply can't or won't work in America, so they end up selling totally normal products on AliExpress. There isn't some huge company called AliExpress that's trying to get you. You're still dealing with individual sellers that have their own reviews and return policies, just like sellers on eBay or Amazon. I would never blindly trust just buying anything on AliExpress, but I also wouldn't do that for eBay, Amazon, or any other website. You always have to do your due diligence and make sure you're buying from a trusted seller that has a 5-star or close to 5-star review. If you look at this $169 Soyo RX 6600M,
oh my god, what is that?
they have sold 248 of these so far with a 4.9-star review after 48 reviews. There's a ton of pictures that people took showing off their GPU working well for them, so I definitely trust buying this kind of product. Now this RX 580 from whatever brand this is and called the Colorful Edition has 21 sold with a 2.3-star review. I probably wouldn't buy that one. Hopefully you see the difference. All right, so back to this card. The other thing worth noting is that this requires a standard 6+2 PSU connector, and the overall design here is pretty solid. This is a very clean plain Meta backplate, which has a nice aesthetic to it, and the card itself does feel kind of hefty, so it's not one of those knockoff, plasticky, 3D printed feeling GPUs that we've tested before. Honestly, the only other thing left to do now is to test it against some other GPUs so you can see this performance for yourself. Our testing rig is the same as it's been over the last 3 weeks with the 12600KF and the 32 gigabytes of DDR4 in here, and big thanks again to Corsair and Antec for the hookup on the other parts. All right, so starting with 3D Mark's Time Spy, we got a score of 8,314, and this is just ever so slightly below the desktop grade RX 6600, and then both of these are of course lower than the RX 5700 XT. We'll talk about how the RX 5700 XT fits into this meta equation after the benchmarks, but just for a reference point, the 5700 XT is also a $150 graphics card, but it's used. Next up, we have Cyberpunk 2077, and when using 1080p with high settings, we got exactly the same 66 FPS with both the RX 6600 and 6600M, and then that's a bit behind the 75 FPS of the 5700 XT. Starfield was tested after that, and we know this one favors AMD a bit, and just like Cyberpunk, we got the exact same result with the 6600 and 6600M, and then that's slightly behind the 5700 XT. I'm also going to show you Hogwarts Legacy just so you can see a little bit of a difference here. The RX 6600M got just one small FPS behind the 6600, but let's be reasonable, that's definitely within our margin of error, especially at ZTT HQ. Here's Rust, where we got a little bit of different action though. For whatever reason, the 6600M actually got a bit above our RX 6600 result, and just like I said earlier, Tech Yes City saw the same thing over a couple of different games, so it's not too surprising. Here's the rest of the games that we tested with the RX 6600M versus the 6600 and the 5700 XT, and other than some outliers, everything remains pretty consistent. To recap, the RX 6600M is basically the same performance, if not ever so slightly behind the desktop grade 6600, and both of these are about 10% or so behind the 5700 XT. And just like last week, here's the full Notion database of our average FPS numbers across every game, and here you'll also find the RTX 3050 6GB and the 1660 Super. Both of these are lagging behind quite significantly. After seeing all of the performance data, where are we at with the meta? This is actually very easy to break down. If you're trying to build the ultimate price to performance budget build between the $400 to $500 price range, then you should definitely go with either the RX 5700 XT or this new RX 6600M, both for about $150. If you prefer to buy used, which remember, the 5700 XT was a heavily mined on graphics card during both crypto booms, then go with that one from a place like eBay, Mercari, or Jawa. If you prefer to buy a brand new option and you're willing to buy from AliExpress, then go with the RX 6600M. The 5700 XT is the better card of the two in terms of total performance, but the 6600M is brand new, which is an advantage. Now, I'll admit, both of these options don't really have the best warranty policy or option available to them, but if you're in the market for a $400 to $500 build, that's probably not the biggest concern for you. With the 5700 XT, your warranty is most certainly long gone already, and with AliExpress, you will have a warranty and return window, but things could get a little complicated. I do have confidence that some of these legit Chinese companies will try to take care of you if something goes wrong, but you do have to work with a Chinese company in order to get the problem resolved. With the language barrier, different laws and customs, and the time zone change depending on where you're at, I can bet it won't be a super straightforward process. So definitely keep that in mind if you're thinking about purchasing a card like this. Either way though, I'm personally perfectly fine with either a new 6600M or a used 5700 XT. So for people like me, both of these cards are the new meta. Unfortunately, the used price of the 5700 XTs is climbing, and it's becoming more and more tricky to snipe these for the $120 I've been paying over the last year. So there's a very real chance the 6600M is gonna fill that spot for me. If you are considering buying either one of these cards for your next budget build, then don't overstress the CPU as well. Just get a Ryzen 5 3600. You can find these also on AliExpress or the used marketplaces for about $70, and I just did this exact combo with my latest $400 pure performance build guide from a couple of weeks ago. You can click the upper right hand corner for that. And if for whatever reason you don't want to buy any of these and you can only buy a brand new NVIDIA graphics card, I'm not judging you, then feel free to click the video that's on the screen now.